I'm a PhD epidemiologist, and I was drawn into the field of medical science to begin with because of my own chronic health conditions. So I'm a chronic disease epidemiologist in particular. And since I was 10, I've struggled with pelvic floor issues, Crohn's disease. And because of that, I'd found that physical activity was one of the most important things that I could do proactively to stave off a lot of the symptoms that made my life really difficult and would lower my quality of life. Recently, just maybe 6 months ago, or when was it? Back in October of 2019, I began boxing and found that I really enjoyed it and that it was really providing a lot of relief for me with my chronic health issues. But a few months into boxing, I began noticing that it was difficult for me to pick up poker chips or playing cards. I was dropping glasses. I was losing the ability to have a lot of fine motor function. I was losing strength in my hands and forearms. And it didn't take me long to realize that it was from boxing. I knew that immediately after boxing, I could feel that the impact was hurting my wrists. And when I was doing one-on-one training, the trainers were having me punch the air next to their head, and I was snapping my arms out, snapping them back. And me and my clinicians think that what happened was I overstretched the nerves in my arm, overstretched the tendons, and so I have a kind of an acute issue. But because it was in my arms and forearms, it meant that day-to-day work was aggravating it. And so it went from being an acute issue to being a chronic issue because of repetitive stress that I was putting on my fingers. Typing, texting, swiping, using a mouse, left click, right click, using the scroll wheel, all that started becoming agonizing. And I was finding myself avoiding those parts of my job. And as an epidemiologist, I have to spend a lot of time in statistical program software, typing, scrolling, clicking. I mean, it's just a lot of using your hands. And it wasn't really avoidable, but I found myself trying to avoid that throughout the day, trying to hold more meetings if possible, or keep those meetings going on longer, having other people type for me. Luckily, I have a supportive group of coworkers and family who could kind of jump in, and they could drive, the document during a meeting. They could click through the PowerPoint for me. But it was really not getting any better. I took time off of work. I worked from home. This is during COVID, so it was easy for me to work from home for a couple of months, but my arms just weren't healing. So it really became clear that this was becoming a chronic issue. I couldn't solve it by taking a week off of work. I was going to need to be able to function at work with this tendinopathy or tendinitis and neuritis that I was experiencing. And that was scary. It's scary to know that I had to function the way that I did before, meet the same deadlines, but to be that much slower and to not be able to do it without experiencing pain. One of the first obstacles that I found was that finding ergonomic equipment that would help my issue was more difficult than I expected. So my physicians, my physical therapists, my occupational therapists, and even an ergonomist that I hired myself, they couldn't find equipment that was really going to work for me. They had some really great suggestions, but really I was finding a lot of it on my own, all the while clicking and scrolling and typing and really hurting my arms in the process. But spending hours looking at equipment that could allow me to function. So I tried vertical mice. I tried different types of keyboards. I tried mice that are shaped kind of like pens that I'd use that way. I've used mice that you use with your feet, mice that are like gyroscopic and that you can attach to your head, mice that track your eye movements, and all of it either didn't work very well, made it difficult to click a file and drop it into a folder, or to use something like Excel, where you really need pinpoint accuracy to be able to drag numbers from one cell to another. And it was just really difficult to function, even with trying all of this technology. And what made it even more difficult was the fact that I work for the Department of Defense. I'm not active duty Navy myself, but I work for the Navy as a civilian epidemiologist. And the Navy computers, understandably, the Navy wants to avoid any kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? They're trying to avoid hackers. They're trying to avoid a data breach of any kind. Yeah, anything malicious that could compromise national security. Because when you're working on a Navy computer, even though the information on my computer isn't necessarily top secret, but my computer contains PII, something protected by HIPAA, personally identifiable information and private health information. And so we wouldn't want, someone to be able to hack in and gain access to that information. So understandably, they don't want me downloading software, but a lot of third-party software was needed for the equipment that I was using. That was even remotely helpful. So it made it so that it was difficult for me to work on my work computer. So I bought a separate laptop. I could try to get on the Wi-Fi at work, which is spotty at best. But even then, it's difficult for me to run my analyses because I really shouldn't be emailing myself data sets with that kind of information from my work computer to my personal computer. So it's important for me to be honest and to protect the data. So working with my employers, it was really difficult to find solutions. And without clinicians that were familiar with the software, or familiar with the hardware rather, I didn't know what to do. And so I began really searching for something that was plug and play, that would be compatible with any computer, be compatible in particular with the DoD computer, Department of Defense computer, that wouldn't pose any kind of risks to the data, wouldn't get me closed out of my account. And so I began finding these mice, began finding these mice that you could use with your mouth. And a lot of them are plug and play. They have the disadvantage of maybe being more expensive than a traditional mouse. They have the disadvantage of looking like a kind of scary device that you would see on a wheelchair. For someone like me, who luckily only has an acute injury, there's something a little scary about working with a device that very clearly is meant to clamp onto a wheelchair and to work for a quadriplegic. But being a healthcare professional, I realized very quickly that you need to use the products that you need to use, and it's important to get rid of any stigma or taboo around using equipment that our bodies need. And so I grabbed I contacted QuadJoy and a couple of other companies and asked them if they offered free trials. Some of them did, but because of the expense involved with shipping, and it actually made more sense just to purchase the product and return it if it didn't work, rather than do a trial. And also hygiene-wise, since these products are made to use with your mouth and your face, especially with COVID, it was important that I wouldn't be able to use one of these devices on a trial basis, just given that I could, it wouldn't be sanitary. Anyway, so I guess what I'm trying to say is I was reaching out to see if I could use any of these devices on a trial basis, and found that the best method would really be to purchase the device, use it on my own, and return it if it didn't work. And that would be the most financially sound decision, and it was the most sanitary decision as well. To be able to rest my arms for 12 to 24 months. I mean, that's the goal that I have, is to rest my arms from mousing, clicking, texting, to rest my arms for 12 to 24 months, and to really only use them for my physical therapy, and otherwise just rest them from boxing, which I've just ceased altogether, but two, to rest them from mousing and typing if possible. So what I began finding was that there were these mice that you could operate with your mouth, and it seemed clear to me that was going to be the option that was going to not hurt my neck, but also retain enough accuracy in the device. So it wasn't going to hurt my arms at all, wasn't going to hurt my neck, wouldn't strain my eyes, and I'd actually be productive and quick. So the QuadJoy was one of several products that I looked at online. What stood out to me about the QuadLife device, though, is that it incorporated a number of features that I would want in a single device. Because where I was otherwise, I was using so many devices, all of which had to hook up to my body in some way, that I felt sort of tethered to my chair. I had a microphone that I wore as a headpiece, but I also had a sit puff switch that I'd use for left click and right click that I also had to wear as a headpiece. So I was wearing two bits of headgear that were plugged into my computer. I was using to move my mouse. I'd previously been using a 3D rudder, which is built for gaming, I believe. I think it's a gaming device. But again, all of these things had to be plugged in, and there's wires everywhere. What I really liked was that the QuadLife device was a product that would allow me to use the mouse to left click, right click, scroll, and even call up an on-screen keyboard that I could type on. It's not an option that I would want to use to type a long document, but it's something I could use to enter a password in, or a URL that's really difficult for my Dragon software, my speech recognition software. Sometimes that speech recognition software doesn't recognize a URL very easily. So you just type it in using that on-screen keyboard. And so using the QuadLife device, I could do all of that while keeping my arms down by my side. And so I was finding very quickly that after a few days of using it, that I was getting some results for my tendinopathy. They were short-term results, but I could see that this was moving in the right direction. I was able to rest my arms by my side. In theory, I could have my arms in casts while using the QuadLife device, which makes sense because a lot of the users don't have use of their arms the way I do. And so it needs to be able to function without you using your arms to fiddle with the device at all. It's also easy to get the device in and out of screen. So I use the device, it's right in front of my face for most of the day, but during a meeting like this, it's really easy for me to use this gooseneck to move it out of view, to be able to maintain eye contact with people. Whereas a lot of equipment that I was using, it looked like I was in a Clockwork Orange. You know, I just had wires hanging off of me, and it was distracting. I don't have any shame, so it doesn't matter. I don't get embarrassed. So it's fine for me if I have a bunch of devices hanging off my head. If it's working, that's fine. But in truth, because I have Crohn's disease, I'm getting up from my desk a lot, having to move back and forth. And so it really wasn't viable in the long run for me to be able to have to continue to resituate all of these devices on my head. I really was looking for a device that would have it all in one, and QuadLife has that. And I was really having seems very simple, but I was having a lot of difficulty with devices that would allow me to scroll. If you really think of the way you can scroll is using a scroll wheel or a scroll dial, whatever they're called on a mouse. Or you can move a mouse over to the up and down scroll buttons on a menu, or you can use a trackpad to scroll. But using the roller mouse, moving my fingers like this, that's exactly what killed it all day long. I mean, this was really contributing to my tendinopathy not healing. Same thing using a trackpad, that was out. And a lot of these other mice that I was using would make it difficult to actually get the pointer to focus on something as small as the little up and down arrows. And so it would take me sometimes 3 minutes just to get the mouse situated into the right spot, and then to use maybe a foot pedal clicker or a sit puff switch to actually get that button to move. It was really demoralizing because I'm trying so hard to get my pointer just in the right spot to click. And then all of a sudden, my DoD computer might say, re-enter your password, which happens throughout the day. So then I've worked so hard to get it over there in the corner, and then I've got to move it back to re-enter my password, click OK, move it back down to the corner. By the end of the day, I could feel like crying. It just felt like I was never going to get better. And my clinicians, they didn't know what to do. They still don't know what's causing it to be so extreme. So when I finally got the QuadLife device, it gave me the ability to work. It gave me the ability to sign into this Zoom meeting. It gave me the ability to, move the device between home and work if I want to. It's really easy to move around and to set up on my own. Luckily, I do have the dexterity in my arms to set it up on my own. But I was able to do that, get rid of all of the clutter on my desk, which is stressful in and of itself, and most importantly, be able to move the mouse without overshooting the folder that I'm trying to click on. I mean, the QuadLife device is precise as immediately when using it. It was as precise as using a hand mouse. So because this was built by an engineer and not built by a gamer or built by someone that's just trying to adapt like a scroll, a roller ball, instead of trying to adapt a roller ball to use with your foot, which is really awkward. This is really intuitive. We have a lot of muscles on our lips, and we're used to using those muscles for very precise movements, to speak, to eat, to sip, to kiss, to do anything that we want. And we have so many muscles right there that are designed for fine motor functions. And so it is the perfect place to have a mouse joystick available. So in the QuadLife device, it's built so that you can make really fine movements, and it moves exactly the way you expect it to. Almost every other device I used, the mouse movements were really unnatural. They're really jerky. They move way too slow so you can get there, and it's infuriating. Or it moves way too fast and you're constantly overshooting. And that was actually worse, just watching the mouse overshoot the minimize button on a screen over and over again, especially when you've got a meeting coming up in 5 minutes. I've got a meeting coming up with someone from the Food and Drug Administration, and they want a printout, and I need to print this, and I'm sitting there trying so hard to get my mouse in the right place to print it. It was very frustrating. So the QuadLife device enabled me to be accurate, quick, pretty much as quick as I was before with the traditional mouse, and definitely quicker than I was when my arms hurt trying to use a traditional mouse of any kind. So it allowed me to click, scroll, navigate the internet. And when I combined it with something like a speech recognition software, it made it so that I could click into a URL, try to speak the URL. If that wasn't working quickly, then I could just use the QuadLife device. I keep pointing up there because I have it out of screen. I shouldn't do that. But I could just give a quick sip motion on the QuadLife device to call up the on-screen keyboard, and I could just type in a URL, a password, something that my speech recognition software is just being a pain about. And I know that as I learn my speech recognition software better, that'll improve, and then I'll be able to use them in tandem a lot more easily. But I'm busy, and the QuadLife device worked right out of the box. There's really no learning curve with it. It just begins to work. You use your mouth to move the mouse, you sip to left click, you puff to right click. You want to switch that around. This is where having an engineer behind the device is so critical. Speaking with Mr. Street, he can actually change the configuration for you remotely, and he's thought of everything. He's thought of the fact that when you're sipping and puffing, that there's going to be a small amount of play on the joystick. And so he's created a dead zone around the joystick so that when you're sipping and puffing, you don't get that infuriating experience where you get the mouse right on the arrow that you want to click on, and then you go to sip and it moves out of the way. You know, he anticipated that. And I assume it's because his brother was quadriplegic, and he's designing it to actually be used day in and day out for someone to be productive at work. So I mentioned that I can move a mouse, I can click, I can scroll. I'm not covered in wires. It's not messy and anxiety-inducing, which that's minor, because if it was messy and anxiety-inducing but it worked, I would go with it, but that is nice. And being plug and play. So I think those are the elements that really sold me on this thing within a few minutes of using it. Then early on, I found that that on this device, sipping on it, I was using it so much now that I could actually feel a little pain in my throat because I was making so many sips. I was using the device all day long. I called up Mr. Street, and he helped me change the settings so that I could sip on this by essentially puckering my lips. So now it wouldn't hurt my throat anymore. So the range of possibilities in a device like this is completely game changing. I'm able to make very fine movements. I'm able to adjust it so that it's comfortable to use, so that it doesn't hurt my neck, doesn't hurt my throat. I'm able to use it at the drop of a dime. There's no external software that needs to load. There's no lag time with it. It just works reliably. And since I've been injured for the past, 9 months, having something that I can count on that works reliably and allows me just to rest, and I know when I wake up in the morning that it's waiting for me and to work properly, it's just an enormous weight off my shoulders. Now I can focus on trying to find voice recognition software that'll work, or convincing this dang program to work the way I want it to work, but I don't have to worry about the mouse working. It also pairs up with my phone. So if I want to do something on my phone and I don't want to be clicking or using my nose to peck at my phone, which is what I did for a couple months. I was using my big nose. Luckily I was born with a big nose, and I could use that to backspace on my phone, to click on icons, and I'll still do that if I don't have a bit of technology around. But the QuadJoy, or the QuadLife device, allows me to access my phone without using a stylus, which still hurts my arm, or pointing up at my face, which hurts my elbow. So I can actually let the phone stay on a stand and control the phone within reason using the QuadLife device as well. And I called Mr. Street to ask some kind of innocuous question about fiddling with one of the settings on the device. And really quickly got into asking him what I could do to help increase the visibility of this product. I was really disappointed that none of my clinicians, literally none of my clinicians, have before or since mentioned this product. None of them were familiar with it, which I find surprising, because sip puff technology itself is used by quadriplegics. It can be used by anyone in a wheelchair. It's not a mystery. It's just this never occurred to them, no matter how much they knew that my arms were hurting from using a mouse. They just didn't know about it. And so this is an instance where getting clinicians to be familiar with the product, the same way that a pharmaceutical company might reach out and provide samples to a physician's practice so that they can be familiar with it, and obviously then prescribe it and help the pharmaceutical company financially. It would be really great if physicians, especially primary care physicians, physical therapists, occupational therapists, sports medicine physicians, who else would benefit from it? Rheumatologists would benefit from it because they're seeing so many patients with arthritis, orthopedic surgeons, neurologists. There are a lot of people in clinical practice that should be intimately aware with the fact that QuadLife is an option that shouldn't even really be thought of as an option down the road. It should be like one of the first line options. It helps you rest your arms. If you have an injury to your arms, and if you rotator cuff surgery, rotator cuff tear, or injury of any kind that you need to rest, using the QuadLife product would be much superior than trying to use your left or your contralateral arm to mouse. If you're right-handed, trying to use your left hand, you can create the same problems over there with repetitive strain injury. This can just let somebody have the freedom of resting their arms. It would be intuitive for anyone to set up. To me, especially as a health scientist who's interested in health literacy and improving health literacy for patients and improving, the awareness for clinicians, for improving clinical awareness of devices that can help their patients. This screamed out to me as something that the medical and scientific community needs to be aware of, because it's a device that could potentially help a lot of people prevent further injury, and also just prevent just the mental health strain of tracking down a device that works for you and wondering why it wasn't put in front of you to begin with. I really think of it as, someone breaking their arm and then having to fight to find out that they need to be put into a cast. This is just a product that should be available as a first line treatment for people with repetitive strain injury. I became kind of fanatical about it pretty quickly because it was just the only thing that was working. So I can only describe my experience over 2 weeks, but it feels durable. And in the instruction manual, it explains that as well. This is, you treat it the way you treat a phone, I think is the way the instruction manual describes it. So it's as durable as a phone would be. You could put a phone in your pocket. I take the device to work. I move it in and out of frame when I'm in meetings, not because I'm embarrassed of it. I show it off as much as I can to people. But I move it in and out of frame just because it is in front of my face. So it's, if I don't want to be distracting during these, telehealth and virtual meeting times with COVID, it's really, the gooseneck is almost indestructible. I can shake that gooseneck all I want and it won't move. But then when I want it to move, I can just bend it exactly in the right position and position the device in front of me. I don't worry at all that I'm going to crack the device or break it in any way. That said, I do try to be gentle with it because I take it back and forth to work. So I actually use, you can use a lunchbox, or, I use an old ammo container. So it's just a plastic container, and I work for the DoD, so they're not freaked out if you bring an ammo container. But I use that to just transport it back and forth. But I'm sure that if there was just a carrying case that came along with the device, that people might be interested in, a feature like that as well. For me, it was just simple because I had, an ammo can sitting around from when I lived in Alaska. But again, what's nice about this is that I can fit the device. The device is really portable, so it's easy. I do have dexterity in my arms, so I'm able to take the device and unscrew it. And luckily, it actually doesn't hurt my arms to do that. But I can unscrew it. I can remove the joystick easily, and then I can pack that up, pack the gooseneck in my briefcase, and go to work. And which is a big improvement, as we kind of talked about before with the jumble. This doesn't necessarily mean that these products are bad, but it means that my organization, when I'm busy, and I'm trying to find devices that would work. When I put them into a container to take to work, it becomes a big mess that I then have to untangle. And I mentioned before, I was using a gaming controller to do something similar to the QuadLife device, where I control the mice with these joysticks, try to, use the buttons for right and left clicks, which I could use on my chin. But a couple of things. One is I'd have to hold it with my hand. There was no stand built for it for me to actually, actuate those buttons without keeping my arms bent, which doesn't help someone with an arm condition. And it also used external software. So there's no way I could use it for the DoD. And then I was also using this, I was using it's actually a really good sit puff switch, a really well-designed sit puff switch. Loved it, but it's one more thing to wear on your head. So in a meeting, it is a bit distracting, to be honest, to have a sit puff switch on your head. I'm not embarrassed, I don't care, but it is a bit distracting. But also, this only does one thing. It allows me to left click and right click. That's it. So I'd still need a mouse. So in order to move things, I'd have my sit puff switch on my head to left and right click, have the mouse in front of my head to move things, and then every time I want to type, I have to set the mouse down and type in front of me. And typing was hurting me too. So then if I want to also use, like I said, this looks like a bad infomercial where I'm showing how difficult it is to use simple everyday items. But really, then if I want to use speech recognition software, here I am. I've got two headpieces on, and I'm using a mouse like this, or I'm trying to use a pen mouse, which has a Bluetooth connector. Speaking of which, Bluetooth isn't allowed on DoD computers either. So I've got like a pen mouse like this, which still, in moving my arms, it hurts. I showed you that 3D rudder, which is a great device, but that requires external software, just like this Xbox controller does. So even then, I could take all this stuff to work and only be able to use my laptop that I bought. If I wanted to use the computer at work, I was still having to use other devices that were better than a traditional mouse, but they were not letting the flexors and extensors of my forearms just rest and heal. Some of the things that I'm looking forward to, the first item is completely selfish, and it's that after being in pain for so long, and now actually feeling that I've found a product or a type of product that will allow me to heal, I'm looking forward to healing. I'm looking forward to just my arms healing. And because I am someone with an acute injury, I mean, it's become chronic, but I'm someone with an injury that will improve with time. I'm looking forward to this device helping me heal my arms. I'm looking forward to being able to hold a glass without it slipping out of my hands because I've injured them throughout the day with my typing and mousing. I'm looking forward to getting back to lifting weights again. I'm looking forward to getting back to some version of normal. And to be clear, that to me is not mutually exclusive from continuing to use the QuadLife product. I'm not looking forward in any way to stopping using the QuadLife device. So if I use the QuadLife device for the rest of my career to prevent my arm injury from coming back, I'll be more than happy to do so. So I'm not in any way trying to distance myself from the device at any point. I'm more than happy to just use this instead of a traditional mouse, which has enough of its own issues that I actually prefer using the QuadLife device at this point to the other mouse devices. I'm looking forward to actually, I haven't mentioned this to you guys, but I'm looking forward to maybe purchasing another 2 devices because I'd like to have one for home that I could use between my laptop and my personal computer. I'd like to have a separate one at work. And then I also bring my laptop to work. So I'd actually like to have at least something set up for me to either use a third device for my laptop at work, or maybe just move it back and forth between my laptop and my PC. But it's such a good device that, I mean, I really would consider and am strongly considering purchasing additional devices just to have stashed at the different stations I'm at. That because of a device like this, I'm not, it doesn't make me feel disabled. I have a disability, but I'm able to function like I'm not disabled. And I think that's one of the things that anyone with a disability wants, is to, we're not ashamed of our disability. We'd of course love to magically get rid of it, but living in the real world, we know that that's not going to happen. So if we need to function, we just want to be able to function without being reminded of our disability constantly. So being able to do that is a huge win. So I'm looking forward to resting my arms and healing my arms as much as I can. I'm looking forward to being able to continue to work independently, like I strove to do all throughout my 20s and 30s. I'm not about to give that up now. And with this, I can mouse independently. And I'm also looking forward to doing what I can. To be honest, this sounds cheesy, but it's true. I'm the one that reached out to Mr. Bill Street to say that I want to advocate for this product. Working as a healthcare professional, I know what it's like to see big gaps in knowledge. I'm a medical scientist, and I routinely see these gaps in our knowledge that we need to fill. And typically we fill it with a clinical trial. We find a device or a medication, we run a clinical trial and see whether or not it was effective. So for this, we don't need a clinical trial. I mean, this is a consumer-based decision, and anecdotally, I can say this device works. I see that there's an enormous gap for people like me who have difficulty moving their arms, or where it's painful to move their arms. And I want to prevent anyone else from having to experiment with 1,000 failed devices. For them, some of the other devices might work for them. But for me, if they're anything like me, a lot of devices are not sufficient. And I want them to not have to go through almost 9 months or whatever it's been of searching for a product. I want them to just immediately hear from one of their clinicians, or from someone on a message board, or from a family member, that if your arm's hurt and it's not resolving from simple adaptive technology, or just moving over to another hand, that the next step could just be going to the QuadLife and just skipping over all the products in the middle that are likely not going to work for that person. But to at least have it as an option is important, because being in a position where there's no option is distressing. It's emotionally distressing, it's physically painful, and it's difficult on the people around you. Your coworkers have to wait longer. I had my spouse mousing and typing for me for a while. So this is really important for quality of life, and for probably improving, for me, it's going to improve my prognosis. I'm going to be able to heal quicker and more completely because I have access to this device. Obviously, I can't, clinically or professionally promote a single product, but I can personally certainly do that. And for me, this product has been a complete game changer.